पाजो गोबिंद पूल मात जाह मानस जन्म का एही लाह पाजो गोबिंद पूल मात जाह मानस जन्म का एही लाह गुर सेवा ते भगत कमाई तब ये मानस देही पाए इस देही को सिमरै देव सो देही भज हर की सेव सो देही भज हर की सेव भजो गोबिंद पूल मात जाह मानस जन्म का एही लाह.
Now, welcome friends, once again to another podcast in the Holy Truth series, given as always in the name of the Supreme Lord, who wishes once again to impart the very high truth of what many call God, life and creation to the sincere seekers of the world. Now this high truth of the ages is based upon the noble path of Sant, path of the true saints, also known as universal truth, true spirituality or true religion, that is so graciously gifted by the holy masters, perfect saints and noble mystics in every age, even today. Now upon sincere inquiry, one can easily recognize that this noble path or true way encompasses all true faiths and beliefs as the noble source of all, details of which can be found in our spiritual centers, holy literature or YouTube channel, as well as the Holy Discourse series of ISTAuk. But before I begin today's session of spiritual questions and answers, I would first like to make a short introduction about who we truly are and what we represent here today. We are the International Spiritual Truth Association, or ISTA for short, and although now global, we originally set up in 2016 in the UK by request of the Holy Masters of the day, who derived their authority from Great Master Baba Savan Singh Ji of the holy lineage of Sant in India, the Levant and Persia. Now our given mission is simple: to tell the full truth about true spirituality or true religion from the Supreme Lord's point of view, especially for the modern age. Yet this high teaching is not new. It is an age-old path of true spirituality, known today as the Holy Truth of Sant, which in fact has been discreetly taught throughout the ages to the most sincere seekers of the time, alongside the more familiar religious or philosophical teachings that we all know of. Indeed, Holy Masters tell us that the simple teachings of mass religion and philosophy are only there to elevate the masses to the position of higher truth seeking, so that they can understand and ultimately practice true spirituality or true religion. Therefore, our mission here today is simple: to impart the very highest truth of the Supreme Lord to those who wish to know, with all the love, grace and wonder that such a gift entails, for which they are known as the truly fortunate ones. As for myself, I am a sincere devotee of the highest truth of Sant, who has given his life in the service of the true Lord. As such, I do not seek any recognition, praise or reward. I act solely with the authority and by request of the Supreme Lord itself and the Holy Masters of today, to simply tell the full truth of God, life and creation for the modern age. I speak, therefore, as one who has been gifted with true knowledge of that high truth, and as one who lives in the Supreme Lord's will. Thus I offer my humble demonstration and knowledge to all who seek the same. Now, as a friend on this noble path to God realization, I only ask that you put aside my human mortality and instead listen to and take heed of the loving message that the Supreme Lord has to offer you via this humble form, who has himself been transformed by the holy masters of today. Thus I represent the proof that truly anyone can rise above their given karmic role to become truly noble once again by the Lord's true grace, if only they earnestly seek it. Therefore, everything I shall share with you today is a gift of wisdom direct from the true Lord itself, for the sincere seekers of high spiritual truth. As for myself, I am a simple messenger and perfect friend, whom the true Lord has gifted with direct knowledge of the holy truth, which I have been asked to share with you. So although I shall speak with the authority of one who has been instructed to do so by the Supreme Lord, please do not attempt to praise or glorify this humble messenger in any way, for you too are all divine beings undergoing a human experience, although you may not yet be aware of this. Therefore, what is given to me freely by the highest authority, I give to you the same. In return, I only ask that you open your heart and mind to the holy truth that the Supreme Lord has to offer you. Now, for those who need further assistance, they may privately contact the main speaker directly via email or video by first subscribing to our valuable information service at www.istauk.com and then requesting the direct contact details of our main speaker from our administrators. He will endeavour to answer all spiritual queries within 48 hours of receipt, but please be patient if he should take a little longer due to his busy schedule and sheer number of inquiries. Thank you. Let's now begin the question and answer session.
Thank you. The first couple of questions are around karma. What is karma versus grace that holy masters speak about? Can you elaborate more on this?
Okay, this is a big subject area. First, let me explain the difference between karma and grace that many people don't understand. Karma can be otherwise translated as destiny or fate, which means that the events you have to experience in this life, the form you take to experience those events, and the manner in which they are experienced are all determined by something called karma, which is based upon all the past actions, thoughts, deeds that you have done in the past in previous life forms. So that means that there's an ongoing journey of each soul through creation. And that ongoing journey traverses all the 8,400,000 species of forms that exist in the physical realm. So karma is simply a means by which people can act out their given roles in the human form. That is prescripted and predestined, which means it cannot be changed. But then we have something called grace. Now, grace is something very different and very much misunderstood. You could say grace is divine intervention, which is gifted to those who devote themselves to spiritual practice. So out of those karmic beings who are undergoing their nominal life, there are some individuals who are extraordinary, and these extraordinary individuals seek high truth. And for that, grace is given to them by the Supreme Lord, a recognition of the time and effort they put into such an inquiry, or such a practice for those who are practicing high spirituality. And this grace can, in some way, override karma, in the sense that while somebody may be going through a karmic experience which is predestined, they may not feel anything, or they may even not be aware of it. So, or the effect of that karma will be limited. But still they have to be there at that appropriate place, meet that appropriate person, do that appropriate thing, experience all the ups and downs of life in the same way as anyone else would. But one who has grace upon them, something very different takes place within them, not externally. Others see them just the same, but within them, they don't seem to be bothered by what the Lord has given them, whether he makes them stand on their feet or on their head, whether he gives them honor or dishonor, whether he gives them success or failure. They keep their balance because they understand that there is more to life than the physical form, that they are actually a spiritual being undergoing a human experience. All this is gifted by the Lord to those who inquire sincerely about high truth spirituality. So grace is something special that is given to those who are true seekers of the true Lord. And that can, as some people put it, cancel out the effect of karma. But it has to be explained that karma cannot be changed despite what people say. The only way that is possible, which is very rarely, is if somebody surrenders their entire life to the Supreme Lord. Then indeed their karmic record can be rewritten at the causal and astral plane. And for such an individual, though destined to experience something quite dreadful or distracting, that is overridden by another experience that allows them to practice true spirituality and even help others and serve the Lord in such a way. And the Lord itself takes care of the karma that was to befall them. So this is a very rare event. But that's the difference between grace and karma.
Thank you. Can good thoughts and deeds cancel out bad thoughts and deeds, or vice versa? Or is there some other way to escape the trap of karma?
I think this is a popular human conception that if you do something bad, but then do something good, which is perhaps a little greater, it cancels out the bad. Because that's the way people look at it, called mitigation, here in this physical world. But unfortunately, in the universal law of karma, that doesn't happen. Every act you do, whether it's good or bad, sits alongside each other. They do not cancel each other out. So today you're a noble human being, and tomorrow you're a wicked human being. Both stand side by side as deeds that must be repaid, must have something called retribution marked against them. So karma doesn't cancel it out. It's not like saying that, oh, I did so many bad things and now I'm doing good things, so that cancels out the bad things because I've been transformed. No. That still remains in your account. The difference is that if you're fortunate enough to be initiated by a perfect living master and start practicing true spirituality, you can rise above the effects of karma so that it doesn't weigh you down and it doesn't bring you back to this physical plane. It allows you to progress on your spiritual journey in higher planes. So that's the point of spiritual practice. It's not that it cancels out the previous karma, because the record of karma is exacting to the letter and must be met out at some point. But if you rise above the effects of the karma in the future, then who will be there to pay it? If you're not there, if the court has given you a summons to do this or to do that or to pay this fine, but you're no longer there, who's going to pay the fine? It just stands unwritten. And because as a spiritual practitioner, if you're not there to collect the debt or the reward indeed, because also good karmas can hold you back to make you come to this world again, just as bad can, then you have risen above. And that's the point of true spirituality. That's why even Babaji himself says, you cannot eliminate the karma. You cannot change what is written for you, good or bad. You must go through it, but you can go through it smilingly and indifferently and with faith in the true Lord that no harm will come upon you as a result, because you are in the process of being transformed and rising above the effects of karma in time. So this is a very important point, no holy master ever says that you can cancel a karma, or you can change karma or destiny. They simply say, get the hell out of here, rise above it all. And that's the point of sadhana.
Thank you. I think you've answered this question. Is it possible to live a karma-free life here on earth?
Yes, because if you surrender yourself to the will of the Lord or live in the true Lord's will, then all you're doing is fulfilling the obligations that the Lord has given you, even that of a villain maybe. But you're doing it in the Lord's name. You do not act out of any selfish motive or any interest in your own physical self. You just act according to the Lord's will in the Lord's name alone. Now such a one perform what's called nishkam karma, which is selfless living. They do not live for their ego self, they live purely in the will of the Lord. And for such, the Lord shields them and protects them from any real harm. It is a grand way to live, and it is possible for anyone who seeks the high truth to actually do this. And this is something we recommend that people should try for 7 days. Test it out. Live in the Lord's will for 7 days. See how more smoothly your life runs. And if you are successful, try it again, another 7 days. And keep on doing that. And you'll find eventually that living in the Lord's will is much better way of life than actually living under your own will. Because you no longer have to worry about making choices and the consequence of choices, which is the real bugbear of human existence. What should we do? And what will be the consequences either way? Say, so what? I don't care. The Lord will take care of it. I'm just going to go with the flow.
Yeah. I remember this being talked about in previous satsangs, and I think the hardest part of doing that is not allowing life to take over and you get caught up in everyday humdrum.
Well, you still have to go through life, but the difference is you're remote from it. If you have faith and trust, because this living the Lord's will comes along with faith and trust in the Lord. If I'm going to live in the will of somebody else, I have to complete faith and trust that will, that living that will is good for me and good for the world at large, and not be judged. So alongside that means do not judge the Lord's will, and have complete faith and trust in the Lord. Therefore, then no problem. But otherwise, if you try to judge it or analyze it or question it, then yes, life can get in the way, because you will say to yourself, oh, but maybe this, but maybe that. You'll make every one of 100 excuses to go along your habitual way of doing it your own way, with the obvious previous results of 50-50. You've got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. But if you've got a 100% chance of getting it right, who would not opt for that, really?
But not many people do it.
Because they haven't tried it. Those who have tried it properly, according to the rules that I've explained, they never go back. Sometimes they slip because they forget. They get so comfortable. In fact, the problem is that living the Lord's will gets you so comfortable and so complacent. You just think everything is tickety-boo, nice and nicey. Then you forget, and sometimes you slip. You get caught up in the events of the world because they drag you in thinking, well, I'm okay. I'll try and help this one, or I'll try and do this way, and get over-involved in the world. And when you get over-involved or overindulged, that's when the problem happens. But if you just remember that to enjoy living in this blissful bubble of the true Lord's will, then you don't allow yourself, with practice, to do it. It just takes practice to slip into the worldly ways to conform with others. Because sometimes you feel you want to, even against your better judgment, oh, I should go along with this person because they'll feel upset if I don't, or something. You start analysing and questioning what should be done. Whereas if you just live in the Lord's will and react accordingly, just simply react to the events given according to the rules, then you never have a problem.
Thank you. A couple of questions around the third eye. Do perfect living masters, holy masters of the Supreme Lord, only spiritually interact with initiates once their soul has crossed the third eye center?
Yes, in a spiritual form, that's right, because the real master is the Shabad, the spiritual form that lies within us, within our own consciousness. So the only way to get in touch with that spiritual form is through spiritual practice. So once somebody has attained the point at which that master resides, at the third eye, the Tisdatil, then you can interact spiritually with the master. And that is different with physical interaction. So for example, when you physically meet a perfect living saint or holy master, you can interact with them physically with the limitations of the physical, in the same way you interact with anybody else. But that can be quite difficult for many to achieve, because there are so many hundreds of thousands of followers, and you're just one of them. How would you interact with the master physically? Very difficult. But if you were to reach the eye center through the spiritual practice shown to you, then you will meet the radiant form or spiritual form of the master, and you can start interacting with the master whenever you wish. And in fact, you will find that that interaction is much more involved and much more special than meeting the physical. And you don't actually need the physical at all. You look at the physical from a distance and say, wow, what a manifestation. If only people knew who this person was. They treat him like a physical being, but he's so much more than that. So you just look at him in wonder, but you have no desire to rush to his feet, touch his feet, or speak to him, anything like that, because you understand that this physical external manifestation is graciously limited in comparison to the radiant form, the spiritual form, or the true form of the master within. So why would you bother interacting with the physical? Although you enjoy looking at the physical in awe and wonder of what this physical being represents and how cleverly they disguise who they really are, it becomes a state of awe and wonder, which is why some people, when they have crossed the eye center and stand before the master, they say absolutely nothing. They just stare in absolute wonder and awe and amazement. And the master recognizes that that soul has crossed the threshold of ignorance to knowledge, and therefore there's a communication between them which is telepathic, nothing to do with physical. So yes, spiritual interaction only occurs when you cross the eye center, cross the third eye, and enter the inner realms, even at the very lowest stages, which is completely different experience of the physical interaction.
Thank you. Are there any foods that positively or negatively affect access to the third eye center?
Yes, that's true. Masters lay down certain rules to start with, that be a vegetarian or a vegan diet, because food does affect you. It carries a certain vibrational energy that can either lower or raise your consciousness. So if you're a true spiritual practitioner and the objective is to raise your consciousness to a high level of understanding and higher truth, then why would you eat something that weighs you down? For example, if I want to climb a mountain and I have the opportunity to wear just a shirt on my back, or carry a heavy backpack weighing me down, which one would be the better option to get up the mountain? So masters have given certain ground rules of what we should eat in order to stop weighing us down. And this weighing down effect also has karmic implications, which means it can bind us to the earth. Because the more we take from this planet, especially more than we need in any form, the more we are bound to this earth to repay it back. Nothing is free. We think it's free because we just pick it and eat it or use it. It's not free. Even if you've earned the item, let's say you've earned some money, and therefore you go and buy a banquet with this and you stuff yourself, or you buy a luxury car and you think it's free. It's not free, because this is binding upon you, and this binding is what brings people back again and again into the realm of the physical. So foods come under that category of binding. It binds you down. So if you have a taste for food, a liking for food, an unhealthy obsession with food, then definitely that will pull you back here again to continue to experience that enjoyment of food and things like that. So foods definitely do affect you. Now, out of the foods that you're allowed, let's say from the vegetarian base, there's a further restriction for those who wish to embark upon high truth spirituality, because even some vegetables are what we call rajasic in their quality, and rajasic are called agitating, and an agitated mind cannot enter the very high realms of high spiritual truth, because the path is so narrow, the width of a hair that the masters say, that you have to achieve a certain level of stillness of the mind to cross the threshold of the eye center. And how would that be possible if your mind is agitated? For example, if you want to see a clear reflection of yourself in a pool of water, but you agitate the water, you'll never see a clear reflection. You'll never have perfect vision. Similarly, one cannot have perfect vision within if they are agitated on the outside due to their diet and other things. So the further restrictions are things like chilies or hot spicy foods, then things like caffeine products or stimulants, then certain types of stimulating foods like garlic and onions and certain other things, and radishes and leeks, and foods which have a stimulating category, they overstimulate the mind, and therefore that person, when they try to sit in meditation, they feel somewhat unrest and agitated. They don't have that perfect stillness needed to cross the threshold. So holy masters say, avoid these things.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You mentioned garlic.
Yes.
I know you said not to use garlic, but I use it purely for medicinal purposes. I've really got
There are other things, to be honest, that can be used equally. It is a taste that we like, but unfortunately garlic is rajasic. It is mentioned in the holy books of Sant and the Guru Granth Sahib. But I have to say that for the vast majority of people who are on this path, if they have a small amount of garlic that they can hardly notice in the food, just as background, they could possibly get away with it, because there is a hierarchy of offensive foods. The highest being chilies or hot spices, definitely. That is the number one. Then what's considered as rajasic is then garlic, then onions, and then caffeine. So these things are considered something you should avoid. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying about these foods and that, but isn't there a danger that we're focusing too much on these things and turning into a fad?
No, that's the objective is the opposite. Not to get too involved with the world, but to limit your connections with grounding you down to this world, or weighing you down, so that you become spiritually orientated. It should not become a fad or a trend. You can turn anything into a fad or a trend, but you should not, as a spiritual practitioner, you should not be obsessed by anything except your spiritual practice. And that spiritual practice has guidelines. One of the guidelines is you do not cause harm in creation, whether it's through killing or eating animal foods, or harm to yourself through eating foods which are incompatible to your health, which is another problem. Because a lot of people may have a problem with certain foods, but they eat it regardless, and it gives them poor health. And if a person is in pain, poor health, or sick, how can they focus on higher truth seeking or meditation or spirituality? It's simply not possible.
Yeah, I understand that. If you have issues with certain foods and you're allergic to certain foods, and you have to do what's necessary. But if you are meditating, and if meditation is all powerful, then surely it will override all this garlic and ginger and all these kind of things.
If it was that easy, go and ask around the world how many people have entered within.
Ishwapuri was asked this question several times, and in his substance, and he said you have a danger of turning it into a fad.
Yes, that is a danger.
You can overthink it.
But overthinking is different from practice. For example, you could be overthinking spiritual practice, and some people can say, I'm going to renounce the world. I'm going to follow this guru or this holy master and give up my family life. That's also overthinking. Following the spiritual path is not an extreme. It is the middle road. It is a sensible path. For example, if I know that walking on this road is full of thorny stones, and I'm only wearing a small chappal, a small sandal that can be pierced by these thorny stones, but I have an opportunity to take a similar road next to it, which is a flat road, a safe road, would I not use the same? Would I not exercise my logic and my reasoning to follow that road? It's not an obsession. It's a necessity for somebody who wants to attain the very high truth. There's a difference between following ground rules that ground you here and obsessing about those rules but not doing the practice. That's what the Ishwarji is saying. Because what it is, people who can't do the spiritual practice, they instead obsess about living right. right, this is the way to live in the world. They do all the right things, they do good, they go out there, but they don't actually do their spiritual practice. Then, what's the point? It's become an obsession rather than a necessity. All yogis of the past, all successful aspirants followed this simple rule. You never saw them obsessing about anything. They'll simply avoid it because they know the effect it has upon them. They understand the logic, but they'll never give big lectures about it, start movements saying, right, we should all be vegetarian or vegan, or we should all be avoiding spices. No, they don't do anything like that. They just quietly go about their business because they're only interested in the goal. And this is just a means, not the end. It's when the means becomes the end that it becomes a problem and a cult. Yeah, there's a clear difference.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to faith. There is a saying in the Holy Scriptures that says, true faith can move mountains. Is this statement true? And can faith really change the outcome?
Yes, this is obviously a saying in Christianity, a very famous saying. You see, when we talk about true faith, what do we mean by that? True faith is absolute faith. And absolute faith means it is absolute. If somebody is able to have absolute faith in the Lord, then actually they can do anything. Because absolute faith means that you have the power of the Lord within you. Because this is a path of love and devotion. If you're able to attain that level of love and devotion that true faith demands, then you will be able to do whatever the Lord can do. The question is, would you do it? Would you go against the Lord's willing by modifying the creation in any way? Because by that point you understand that the Lord's will is perfect. And why would you interfere with something that is perfect? So it's a saying to say that yes, true faith can level the mountains and dry the seas and so on. But that doesn't mean that this is something that anyone of true faith would do. So therefore they won't change the outcome of anything. Because in actual fact, they're so preoccupied with their involvement with the true Lord, their attachment to the true Lord, that they actually don't notice what's going on around them so well. So they don't even know the outcome. They don't realize the outcome. So it's a little bit, it's just demonstrating what true faith can do, not that anyone would do it. We never see the masters of true faith in the Lord, doing these things. They do not perform openly miracles, despite what Holy Scriptures claimed they did. They didn't actually do those things. Those things are often added much later. And they're not part of the original text. Because, like Jesus said, I have come here to observe the law, to uphold the law, not change the law. So he would not interfere with the law of karma, to such a point that when it came to the time of his crucifixion, he just happily accepted it. And not only that, he forgave the perpetrators. He says, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. He didn't use his magical power to escape. He could have done. He had the power to do it, but he didn't. You see, so whilst his faith in his Father was absolute, it meant that he goes along with the Lord's will. He just happily went along with it. But of course, in recognition of this, the Father, the Lord, withdrew all the suffering. So he didn't feel anything. He didn't feel any pain. There's no mention in the Bible of him groaning and wailing and hollering and shouting out in pain. Nothing. They explain all the gruesome things that happened to him, but never that he moaned about it, which is quite an interesting thing. Because surely, if it's such a moving experience, they would have made big noise about this, that he cried and hollered. But he didn't. He apparently just took it all in his stride. It was the observers who were more disturbed than him by what was happening, because the Lord took away the pain for him. So he was a living demonstration of living the Lord's will to the nth degree, that he was actually crucified. That's how far he went. Now, that doesn't mean that we all have to be crucified to attain the Lord. It just means, though, that if we can have true faith in the Lord, whatever we may endure, we can do so happily, and we can still remain in contact with our high truth. It doesn't affect us, whatever goes on here. We're not disturbed or distracted by it. And that's the most important thing. That for a true spiritual practitioner, whatever we do in this world should not distract us from our higher truth. So this is where faith in what is being brought before us is accepted. A true lover of the Lord accepts whatever is the will of the Lord, even if it's bad. Even if the Lord says, to this day you will suffer, and tomorrow you will have a holiday. He says, okay, whatever it is. Because that person is not because they're a martyr, it's because that person is so in love with the beloved, is so in tune with the beloved, that they know that this imposter character that they're playing on earth has no reality to it. So whichever way the puppet moves the fingers that shadows appear on the wall, the shadows never complain. They never rebel against what they are doing on the wall. They just happily go along with it. So in a way, a person who has true faith and trust in the Lord, whilst they can exercise the Lord's authority, they can actually do whatever the Lord can do, they do not do it.
Thank you. Why do we lose faith easily when facing obstacles in life?
It's because of our perception of reality is not clear. We take this world to be real because we're attached to the physical. So therefore, whatever happens to the physical, we start worrying about it and saying, oh, this is me, poor me, or this is wonderful me, I'm having a good time. And as a result of that, when something comes against our well-being, feeling, physically, we get disturbed, and we call these things obstacles. So whether that thing is a problem with finances, a problem with health, a problem with the people around you, it causes us to lose our balance, only because we are so attached to the physical form that we do not understand that we are actually a spiritual being undergoing a human experience. And if we get it tuned with our spiritual self, just test it out, just try it out a little bit, we will find that we no longer feel the woes of the world. And things that were previous obstacles are no longer there, because we have risen our attention above them. We don't feel them. Obstacles only exist when we put energy into them. When we see something and we react emotionally or physically, then what happens is that thing becomes in our way. We have to overcome that. But if we're remote from the whole thing, if we're attached to something better and higher, such as spirituality and the true Lord, then whatever obstacle comes along the way, we just happily cross it. So it no longer is an obstacle.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions around therapy. Are therapy and counselling okay, or does it undermine the faith that I should have in God and in the power of the holy light and sound meditation?
You see, in an ideal world of spirituality, a person who has reached the height of true knowledge doesn't need any therapies or anything at all. Doesn't even need food for that matter. These are things to sustain the body and the mind. But speaking for most who have not attained that state, yes, this body is a vehicle that's given to you, and so is the mind, a means by which you cross the threshold of this limited physical world and the mental worlds. And as such, sometimes it comes into grief, it comes into trouble. And when it does, it needs a like-for-like method of treatment. So, masters say again, if you're here in the physical and your attention is wholly here, then what else can you do except use physical means to correct it? If you do not have higher awareness, if you do not have the ability to invoke a higher power to heal yourself, then you have to use whatever is at hand. So for most people, in the beginning, for example, if it's a mental problem, I think this is regarding that, then yes, you have therapy, you have counseling, you have coaching, because that's what you need at the time. But if you are a spiritual practitioner and you rise above the level of that limitation, of the limitation of the lower emotional mind, then you don't need these things at all. You reason it out within your mind and rise above it by yourself. You don't need therapy. So, yes, it's okay to do this, and it's perfectly fine for a normal individual who knows no different. For a spiritual practitioner, I would say that they can embark upon therapy of some sort, but they should also do their spiritual practice more earnestly, and they will soon find that they no longer need the therapy.
Thank you. Can you explain what is psychic healing? Is this just for our mind?
Yes, I mean, the psyche relates to the mind in psychology. And psychic healing is a practice that's involved in helping to transform the mind into a better way of thinking, or an altered way of thinking, an altered state. Now, spirituality does exactly the same thing, but much so more safely. You see, when people do not have a true spiritual understanding or higher awareness, then they have to use whatever means they can to so-called heal themselves. And the West in particular is very fond of this because they're suffering a lot. They have a lot more time to think about their suffering. So they have a lot more time to think about ways to overcome suffering, whether it's material comforts or counseling or coaching or even psychic healing. And so they embark upon these methods that mind over matter works because they see the yogis able to withstand extreme cold, extreme difficulties through their spiritual practice, and they think it's all a state of mind. They don't understand the spirituality behind it. So they take that to the West and say, right, and this happened in about the 1800s when psychic healing was born, and it became a phenomena that was used by hypnotists and others like Franz Menzer and so on. And they started introducing the fact that you can heal yourself through your mind. For people who were not religious or spiritual in the real way, but even for people who were spiritual and religious, but they were at the lower level, they introduced this system. And yes, definitely, the mind affects our physical and mental well-being. So, but the best way is to use understanding to override the mind. It was invoke higher mind, which we have, something called spiritual mind, or even intellectual mind, to rise above our emotional mind. And our emotional mind is the one that feels that it's suffering so much. But if you can rise above it just by intellectual thinking, why do you need psychic healing? So there is a way, which is a safer way, because psychic healing can also involve a medium, which means somebody who has spiritual guides associated with them, and they use those guides to support you and help you in some way, and you of a lower constitution who doesn't have higher awareness are more susceptible to such a thing, and therefore feel some effect, positive or negative, from it. They call it the placebo effect or a psychosomatic effect. In actual fact, it doesn't work long term in any sense. But some people, their suffering is born in the mind. And because they have their suffering born of the mind, if you change the way their mind sees things by giving it something of faith, then suddenly they become healed. Now, Jesus famously said when a centurion was complaining that his son was suffering and that he risked his life, a Roman centurion, to go to Jesus and ask for his help. And Jesus said, yes. He said, will you help me? He said, yes, your faith has healed him. So what did he mean by that? His mere belief that this is a man of God who could do. Jesus had to do nothing. All he had to do was alter the mindset of that individual, and the son was healed, because the son also was one of faith. So faith can heal. How do you create faith? Say, for example, psychic healing. If you go to a psychic healer and you believe that their spirit guides can heal you, yes, you can feel healed. You can feel the placebo effect. But it's not long lasting. Eventually that will be forgotten and you'll be back in your old ways. Because the moment life churns its fate upon you and you forget that faith, let's say, then eventually you get back to square one. But a lot of people don't realize that it's not enduring. But certainly mind over matter does work, and psychic healers use this. But spiritual, true spirituality says that you should avoid these things. Firstly, because they're illusory and temporary, and secondly, there is a consequence. Because if it involves, say, a spirit guide or some what we call rakshas in Indian language, something of an other spiritual entity that perhaps not in your best interest, it can cause you great problems. You can connect with the lower spiritual world and find great difficulty in crossing past it, because they won't let you go. They're saying, I have done you a favor. Now you owe me. You are born as human. You have the qualities and power of a human being, something we are jealous of. Now we demand payment. You must serve us. This is a consequence that people don't realize, because nobody's come back from the dead to tell us this was their problem. But holy masters, or people who practice the art of dying while living and cross the threshold, they see the victims of this. People have been helped in their life, thinking, oh, through spiritual healing and so on, we've attained something, we gained something. But a heavy price, very heavy price. So that's why, funnily enough, all religions, true religions and holy masters say avoid these things. And people often don't understand, what harm is it if it's helping me? But they don't understand the shark loan system, that they loan you the money at 1,000,000% interest, which you can never repay. And therefore you're trapped with them for a very long time or forever. That's why they say don't go there. Why not use instead faith in the true Lord? Yeah, live in the Lord's will and overcome it. Let the Lord sort it out for you.
Thank you. Is it okay to take medicines or have medical treatment if we are disciples of a perfect living master, or should we just rely upon faith and blessings?
Yes, naturally, because we are physical beings undergoing a physical experience, we have to do things that relate to preserving the physical body. Now, this day and age, it is important to understand that people are not so evolved that they were, say, in a previous age called Satgurus. In Satgurus, people did not need medicines or any creature comforts. They were self-sustaining because they were in tune with their higher spiritual self, albeit at a lower level of Brahma. But they were so in tune with that actually they didn't have any illnesses or anything of any sort like that directly. They would overcome these things. So they didn't need medicines and treatments and therapies and things like that. But if we're attached to the physical body, then we need something that aids the physical body and the mind. Therefore, food, medicines, even clothing, tools, all these things are necessary for us to complete tasks in this world. And if we use them sensibly, there is no harm. But at the same time, we should also try to rise above the limitations of the physical, which is what the Holy Masters tell us. By rising above the limitations of the physical, you are less and less reliant on these things. So yes, it is perfectly fine to use medicines, food to feed yourself, clothes to clothe the body, shelter to protect yourself, until you reach to such a point that you don't need that.
Thank you. Right, I've got a few questions around meditation and sleep. I'm going to read a little passage and then there are some questions that relate to that. During my holy meditation attempts, I have noticed that thoughts and fanciful imagination are a distraction and hindrance. However, I also noticed that sleep is another big obstruction. If somehow I am able to focus and dwell on the holy mantra, then sleep overpowers me. Sometimes it is not exactly sleep, but involuntary. I am getting carried away into thought patterns over which I have no control. And after a few seconds, I suddenly realise that I am beginning to doze off. So one of the questions is, why is sleep so powerful? Is it another entity designed to mislead us?
No, sleep is a necessary for the physical function of the body. Whilst we're in the physical plane, this body needs taking care of, such as feeding it, clothing it, protecting it from the weather, sheltering it, and it needs sleep. So these are biological functions, and there's no problem with them at all. But when we're trying to be a spiritual practitioner, then these things hold us back here physically, and we should try to overcome them gradually and slowly at the pace that we can deal with. The trouble is that most spiritual practitioners are very impatient. They want results yesterday. And this is a problem. We've spent millions of births in lower life forms, traversing the creation, experiencing all kinds of creation, or all kinds of things within creation. And now we expect in a lifetime just to be transformed, just like that, so quickly, so easily. It is not possible. The journey back home is an interesting and equally measurable one as we spent coming here. Just as we indulged ourselves here in the physical realm, so now we have to unindulge ourselves gradually. for some people this is easier than others, but for most people sleep does overcome them. Sorry, just a bit dry. And this is a barrier in all spiritual practitioners. They really struggle with this at first because they need sleep, and if they don't have enough, they fall asleep. The second thing is, if they're weighed down too much with emotions and with heavy foods, then also they will feel heavy in the body and therefore fall asleep, which is why the yogis famously ate only one meal a day, and they would eat light food and not just before sleep. So they could then literally meditate all night, which equates to sleep in the restfulness it brings for those who are able to do it. So one should persevere with this, and if they're serious about crossing the sleep threshold, for example, then they should look about lightening their diet, reducing the emotional impact life has upon them through understanding. And also, they must understand that to cross the eye center, they have to cross the sleep center. So every single practitioner of this higher truth path will have to cross the threshold of sleep during their time in meditation. Now, the greater you are attached to the higher truth, the less you're attached to this world, and the more observant you are about weighing down the body with heavy foods and emotions, then those people definitely find it easier to cross the threshold of sleep and enter into the superconscious state of super awareness. But for those who are living very ordinary lives, it is a difficult problem. It is a problem that they cannot cross the threshold of sleep and eventually doze off. But it is fine. But I would say to them, if they're really serious about this practice, then they should do everything in their power to reduce the load on the body so that they can rise spiritually and enjoy the heights of true spirituality rather than just reading about it. And I think there was something about distractions as well, which we've already answered about how the world can distract you. And to avoid that, just live in the Lord's will. Give yourself up to the Lord and say, I will go by your will, not my own. Therefore, whatever comes my way, I should ignore it. I react accordingly with like for like, or with love and understanding, so that I'm no longer affected by whatever comes my way, because I'm so enamored or in love with the Lord. So again, you need to connect with the Lord in such a way that it is the most powerful thing you have, the most powerful ally. And once the Lord is your ally in everything you face, you no longer worry about what you're facing, and then things cannot distract you so easily.
Thank you. I think you've answered this one. What are some practical tips to overcome this? I know you mentioned about the food.
Yeah, the foods. The make sure you get. Sorry, I'm very dry. Make sure you get adequate rest. And other times, don't work so hard. Don't get so obsessed with the world. Don't get emotionally tied down. Because if you get so emotionally tied down to this world, then it is going to bring you down. And therefore, you are going to more likely fall asleep, weighed with all the burdens of the world. The happiest man is the fool, because he doesn't care about what comes his way. He's always happy. He's always unburdened. But that also is an example of what we could be, but a safer way to do that is not to become the fool, but to become an enlightened one, a wise one, a noble one, a one who practices spirituality so that they act like the fool but with wisdom. They share many similarities because they walk about carefree, but they are not a fool in that they understand the consequences of what they're doing, and they also have a plan to get out. So be like the fool, but not the fool, is the way we should think.
Can we meditate while standing instead?
While standing?
Yes.
Actually, yes, it is possible. In more advanced spiritual practitioners, they meditate 24/7. But our understanding of meditation is limited, because when we talk about meditation, we think about sitting in a particular posture, focusing at the eye center and doing a very kind of ritualistic mechanism. But those who have attained a certain level of higher awareness and are in tune with their Holy Master, with the Lord within them, then they meditate 24/7. But how do they do this? They do this by something called contemplation. Because contemplation is something you can do all the time, no matter what else you are doing. For example, you could be baking a cake, but contemplating on the Supreme Lord. But we cannot say you're meditating that time, because you're not sitting still and silent in a posture, you're moving about. So meditation leads to contemplation. So once somebody's mastered the art of meditation, then they don't need to meditate anymore, because they're in constant 24-hour remembrance of the true Lord and connection with the true Lord. So for example, in actual truth, masters themselves do not meditate. They have no need of it. They're in constant communication with the divine. That's why they can be up all night and all day helping satsangis. And then you say, well, where is their 2.5 hours of meditation, or 6 hours, or 20 hours? They did this in the beginning to reach the point of contemplation. Once they reached the point of contemplation, then they no longer needed to meditate, because they're in constant tune with the Lord. So meditation and contemplation are different things. And if you're in a state of contemplation, you can certainly walk about and do all your life's activities, not just standing. You could be sitting, even watching a movie, and be in contemplation of the Lord, because everything you see about you relate to the Lord. How wonderful this is. You're in constant remembrance and gratitude. Thank you for this. Oh, this is so entertaining. Oh, this food is so delicious. Or this thing is so nice. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, how wonderful. Look how marvelous this creation is. I'm so glad that I can enjoy it for what it is, without being concerned by, the botherations of things, without worry and fear. Because once somebody's in contemplation mode, they have overcome worry and fear.
Thank you. I have heard that sometimes we can clear karma in our sleep. Is this true?
Most certainly, yes. You see, when we practice spirituality in an earnest way, the Lord always tries to find ways to help us. The Lord is not there to obstruct us. The Lord is there to help us in many ways. So sometimes we are such a noble practitioner that we really follow the instructions given by the Holy Master. We try to do our best of how to live correctly in this life. But despite that, remember, we cannot change karma. We have a certain event we must face, which is going to throw us off track for a bit, or could severely disturb us in some way. So what masters say, this is such a noble being. I'm going to help this one along this journey, because that's what I promised. If they do my work, I will help them. So when it comes to paying off some heavy karma, for example, they'll have a nightmare or some difficulty in sleep, in which they will live certain experience and feel all the emotions and unhappiness and misery and torture of that event as if it were real. But it wasn't, because when they wake up, they come out of it and say, oh, thank goodness it was only a dream. So in these cases, definitely karma can be paid during sleep.
Thank you. Going on to the body now. Ishwar Puriji often said that the life of an astral body is around 3,000 years. Does this mean, and there's a few questions, that for 3,000 years we keep the same body form in the astral world that we have in this physical world? In other words, if we are human, that we shall keep a human astral body for 3,000 years, or if we were a tree, we would keep that same body for the same period?
No, it doesn't quite work like that. You see, whilst the astral body determines the physical body, it doesn't mean that the astral body only has one form. Because then, where would be the transmigration of the soul, and where would be the karma implications of migrating through the 8,400,000 species? It would mean that we are condemned in whatever form we have come in. So if you're a tree, you can never escape the realm of trees. But Holy Masters tell us that we can. So although we may be born as a tree in a lifetime, the soul inhabits the form of a tree, and we have the minds of a tree, we can overcome that, because everything has a timeline of events, a period of time in which we have to undergo that experience to collect a particular experience so that we can move on to the next form. Because we're following a timeline of events, it means that we are automatically moving along a script, a predetermined script that says we're going to transform or transmigrate from one form to another. Now, at the same time as one is undergoing all these experiences, their astral form, in other words, their higher body, which is the one who is manifesting through all these countless physical forms, remains the same. So what Ishwarji is trying to explain to us is that in the astral form, we have a particular role to play, a particular identity, in which part of that involves us coming to the karmic plane, the physical realm, in which we enact out so many series of life forms in that journey of that one astral form. But the astral form itself remains the same. So it doesn't change. But its expressions, in other words, the thoughts and consequences of the expressions that it undergoes changes, because it's an evolving experience even for the astral form. So the astral form is there for a limited time, like we should say around 3,000 years. Now in that time, the astral form is existing in the astral plane, going about its duty, whatever that may be given there. At the same time, it is projected into the physical form to undergo karmic transmigrations, karmic involvement. So this karmic involvement is what we are experiencing here as an other self. So part of our self is divided so that we have a karmic experience here on earth, undergoing one of the 8,400,000 species and transmigrating through them. At the same time, our higher form from this, which radiates this lower form, is fixed in the astral realm. We have a particular life for that period of time. But it gets more complicated than that, because even this astral form, which has a limited lifespan of say about 1 to 3,000 years, depending on the particular form you take in the astral realm, also is undergoing changes, many countless numbers of changes, because we have also a causal body. Now the causal body, which is the cause of our existence, exists for millions of years. Now in that millions of years, countless numbers of astral forms will be projected, and those astral forms will project countless numbers of physical forms. So you see how this projection system works. We are much more complicated than just a single entity. We are in fact the entity of mind. Let's say the source of all this physical and mental thing is the mind. We call it universal mind. That universal mind projects itself into an astral form, and that astral form then projects itself into a physical form for something called karmic purposes. It was to fulfill the role of the mind in experiencing creation in innumerable ways. It is only possible to experience the three realms or the three worlds of karmic creation if we have presence in each one of those. So we are simultaneously present in the causal realm, the astral realm, and the physical realm. And in each of these, our particular form there is undergoing a certain experience. But then it also projects itself into the lowest form, called the karmic realms, to undergo a karmic experience in the physical realm, because that is how the mind is designed to experience the entirety of the mental realms, by experiencing all three worlds. Now, because this is a merry-go-round of ongoing, going round and round for millions of years, how do we escape? Because if we are forever just going around this cycle and just changing bodies at different levels, but then changing the consequences lower down, we need a way out. That's why Holy Masters come to tell us that we are in fact soul, and soul is not involved in all of this. Soul is just a spectator. Now it so happens that by the Lord's design, the only way we can get in touch with our soul is by being in the physical realm. So we absolutely need to be here, and we need to be human in order to access and empower the soul to get out of the whole trap. That is the law. That is the universal law of this creation. There are other types of creation we won't discuss because it's not part of our experience. But in this type of creation, this is the law, the gameplay that goes on. And it's a game. The game of the illusion pulling us by making us believe that we are all these characters. And then the soul being a spectator watching the enjoyment it has of how the illusion is being panned out until it becomes empowered by the grace of the Holy Master, the Lord who sent the soul into creation, and says, right, now your time is to come home. So you've got to pack up and go. So at that point, the lowest form, the physical form, in the form of a human being, meets a perfect living master who opens access to the eye center and allows them the means to go home by attaching themselves to the spiritual form within themselves. Now this spirit form, at first, is the astral form. So once they understand that they're merely a puppet from their astral form, projecting into their countless physical forms, then the first level of realization is, I am the spiritual form, I am the astral form, that's the real me, true me. Yeah? And then, sitting in practice in the astral form, meditating in the same way, these astral forms suddenly realizes that it is also a projection. It is not real either. And it actually comes from the causal or the conceptual mind that created the concept of this astral being. That actually I'm just a concept born in the mind of the universal. So therefore I'm not real either. And as you then cross over, because you're doing all this while you're in the physical form, remember, that's why the physical form is so unique and so valuable, because this cannot be done from the astral plane. It cannot be done from the causal plane. It can only be done in the physical. And even then, it can only be done in the human body of the physical form. It cannot be done by a cat, a dog, a tree, or an insect. Only the human form can cross all these realms, yet it is the furthest away. It is an interesting game that the Lord has placed within such a humble form, the human form, the ability to cross all the thresholds that even the deities, including Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, cannot cross unless they come into the human form. All the gods and goddesses and deities that are worshipped are all stuck in their role, and the only way they can escape is by becoming human and meeting a perfect living saint, one who's crossed the threshold of the realm of mind and is a soul being undergoing a human experience. They have no longer the attachment to the mind. By meeting such a one, they can release them or rescue them from the trap of this endless karma. So this is the fascinating thing about the whole thing, that perhaps I've answered this question more widely than the question it was asking, but it's really important for people to understand this hierarchy of ourselves that exists. Each one of ourselves is projecting another form of ourselves for an experience. We're undergoing an experiential life, which is based upon experience, whilst the level of the soul is all about awareness, not experience. Awareness, which is a whole different thing. I won't talk about that today, but having an awareness of something is something different to having an experience of it. Experience always requires duality. Awareness is one. So with an experience, you have to have an experiencer and the experience to have an experience. That's why this whole system was created. Before somebody asked, well, why bother going through all of this? It's because we're having another type of experience of duality, separateness, and how we can play this game of being something other than what we really are and what we can do with it. So the soul came here to have that kind of experience as a spectator, because the soul cannot do it itself. It had to create the mind tool, and then this causal mind creates the concept. This conceptual causal mind creates the astral form, the first form of spirituality, in which then it wants to have a physical or more limited experience, and it creates a physical form by which it undergoes its transmigration. So this is part of the whole game. That's why masters say it's all illusion. There's no reality to any of this. So, but each of these life forms have a lifetime, which Master has said for the astral form is 3,000 years, roughly. It's not exactly that, but and then 3 million years for the mental form, before the whole show is wrapped up.
Thank you. Still on the same sort of theme, Are there animals, trees, and other species in the astral world like there are here on Earth?
Oh yes. Everything that is physically represented here exists there, including this world. One of the most marvelous things you'll witness when you go to the astral realm is you'll see the source of this world. And that world is a reflection of a higher, more beautiful world, earthly plane there. And everything, every molecule, forget the animals and insects, every molecule that exists here exists in the astral realm first as an idea. It is the realm of imagination and idea. And it only becomes manifest physically when that idea is projected into the physical realm of consciousness. And as a participant, we can see it from a physical point of view. So although we can see this from the astral point of view, as an imagination, as an idea, it is not the same thing as physically being a participant. So all the animals, trees and plants that you see here, and many more that we do not see in this world, because after all the astral realm has countless numbers of physical universes within it, with a variety of forms. So we will see many more things there than we know here on Earth. But certainly all the animals, plants and things are represented there because they are also undergoing their own karmic experience, going through this cycle of karmas from the causal to the astral to the physical and so on again, and repeating the whole thing over and again endlessly until they're rescued. So you'll find that they're in the same plight as you, but you are aware of it. They are not.
Thank you.
Yes, you have a question.
You say that the human form has the opportunity to go back home.
Yeah.
Why is it that the human form on other planets doesn't get the opportunity?
Because there are humanoids on other planets, which do have the opportunity as well. I'm not saying we're the only planet that has humans. They all have the opportunity. It's just that we're not aware of them. When masters talk about the human form here in this physical world, they're talking about our own solar system, in which all forms that we know exist. But doesn't mean that the human form only exists here. There are certainly many other planets and other galaxies in which the human form exists, and they have exactly the same thing as us.
So they get the same opportunity.
They get the same opportunity as long as they're in the human form. Yes, there are many other life forms out there which are not human based.
So a master will go there and initiate human forms on other planets?
Yes, the master can project in countless times. The master is not only projecting in this physical universe, there are countless trillions of universes in the astral realm that the masters are simultaneously helping humanoid or other types of beings who are qualified to go home.
The masters we're familiar with, or are we talking other set of
Others, and not ours even. For example, if you talk about Ishwarji or Babaji, let's say the present master and so on, they also exist in they're also helping souls in other universes at the same time, but they don't talk about this.
In other physical universes?
Other physical universes and other physical universes within the astral realm. There's countless numbers of them.
Is that because those souls that they're helping, they were initially on Earth and they've reincarnated on other planets?
No. They have their own law, they have their own time frame, and they exist separately from us. They don't interact with us at all. But the master can project itself into countless forms. Okay, let me try and explain another way. If I take a glass of water, right, and I spray the water into the air, suddenly this glass of water has become 1 million drops in the air. But the water is one. It's the same. And each of these drops are going in a different direction because they've been sprayed radially outwards. So while we're saying that these drops are not the same as the source, but they're in different locations, in different places, at different trajectories, at different times. So when consciousness is projected, when Master's consciousness is projected into different universes at the same time, it is performing its role there, separately from the Master here.
So why is it that if a Master can go to other universes and possibly other dimensions in the physical and initiate people and get them home, why are they not allowed to do that on the astral? Why is the rule not from the astral?
Because the game plays this. This is the law of this particular creation that started from the causal realm. Now in the causal realm, when Carl manifested his creation in a particular format, rules were given, restrictions were given. And in this particular creation, the law states that the only way out is to become human in the physical realm. That doesn't mean that has always been the case. We're talking about our particular experience for us. So the Masters try not to confuse us too much by talking about other possibilities that also exist, but are not of our knowledge. It'll only confuse us. We'll get so bogged down by analysing all these possibilities. We won't do our spiritual practice. So Masters generally don't talk about this. They make a passing reference. But yes, this particular creation, which is to last for 311 trillion Earth years before it is folded and what they call pralabd, dissolution, back to its source, has to undergo a particular rule base. And this particular rule says that only humans, in wherever they may be located, wherever planet they may be, but only the human form can exit this or escape the trap of karma. No other form can, not even the deities. They have to become a humble human being, which is the lowest form of divinity that can exist with awareness of higher truth. It cannot be lower than that, because all the lower forms are unaware. Yeah, so the human is the lowest form. So you have to go from the very lowest, because this is a path of giving up the ego, giving up the identity of the mind, and you can only do that when you're at the lowest level and say, right, that's it. There is nothing for me here, really.
But surely you say that the human form is humble, and surely there's...
In comparison to the deities, very much so.
Surely there's other beings out there on other planets who have more knowledgeable than us.
They have more knowledge in the sense of the physical, but they're not endowed with higher awareness ability. They're very much robot-like.
Okay.
If you're to meet them, you'll find them very unemotional, very unable to respond to your clearly human needs. They do not recognize or understand the feelings you have, maybe not even that of love. So humans have an ability to relate to higher things better than any other form. That's all I can explain to you.
One last thing, can you possibly touch upon what you said about there's other types of physical creation?
Yes.
In other dimensions?
You could call it dimensions. There are countless numbers of them. To give an idea of how big the astral realm is, the whole physical universe that we enjoy as our home is but a speck of dust in the Pacific Ocean in comparison to the size of the astral realm. How many specks of dust can you fit in the Pacific Ocean? And that is the number of alternative physical worlds, universes that exist. Countless numbers of them. You cannot even count them.
And there's masters on those.
And the masters appear in all of them according to their level. Each one has a different rule. Each one has a different law. Yeah. So therefore, the interaction that masters have on those planes are different to what they have here. And don't concentrate on that too much. You'll get so much into that. Let's just get out of here, and you'll see all this for yourself. You'll see the wonder of it all. Which is why most people, like yogis, for example, when they reach the astral realm, are so overwhelmed by the every possibility idea of creation. Like I said, there's many possibilities of physical manifestation. They get stuck there in awe and amazement. They never leave it. Because they are forever infinite. There's infinite numbers of physical universes there. And therefore, you can spend infinite numbers of time watching and observing them in amazement. So that's how you get trapped in the astral realm, which is why we need a spiritual master to say, there's more than this. If you think this is great, there's even more. But you think to yourself, how can there be anything more than this? Every possible manifestation of physicality, of the physical, exists here, and I can just go and look at each one. The master says, no, there is something more. And this is where the absolute faith and trust in the Holy Master saves you. Because what you do not know when you're seeing all these things is that there's a timeline to it all. It will all end crashing down upon you. So masters say, don't get attached to all of this nonsense, because it's going to come crashing down upon you. Move on. Follow me. And that's exactly why we need a living master to cross these thresholds safely. Because without such, we could never do it on our own.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Right, going back to it, what Ishwar Puriji often said, that the life of an astral body is around 3,000 years. Does this reasoning also apply to the causal body with a supposed life of 3 million years?
Yes, as I've explained, each of these manifested forms of experiential creation, or we call karmic creation, has a lifespan. If it didn't, we'd be forever trapped. But they have a lifespan. Now, certainly the realm of the mind, or the causal body, which is actually thought, the causal body is just thought. It doesn't have any form, unlike the astral form. It is merely, it's like smoke. It can assume anything. Whatever it thinks it becomes. It can become the color purple, it become the number 3, it can become a tree, it can become absolutely anything. So this is the source of all our karmic experiences, our manifestations in lower creation. But even that has a lifetime of 3 million roughly Earth years. In fact, it could be up to 10 million Earth years. But mostly it's around 3 million Earth years. So before that is then finished, before that person gets rescued back, in which countless millions of lifetimes can exist in lowest forms. So we can go through, even to get to the human form, we can go through tens of millions of births in lower forms to reach the human form. But all of that is done within the 3 million to 10 million year period.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to talk about money and currency now.
Okay.
Why do people become obsessed with money and material possessions? Are these things just there to trap us? And should we become more carefree about these things?
You see, money is a tool, and like any tool, it can be misused. So the Lord did not make a mistake when he created the system that we experience today. Everything is in proportion to our level of understanding. So as humanity evolves, so tools evolve alongside it to make use of that level of understanding. Money is one of them. So is technology, and so are different types of enterprises. All of these things are there, yes, for us to enjoy, but also to trap. If misused, all of these things carry a consequence. A simple way of putting this is a knife in the hands of a villain takes a life, but a knife in the hands of a surgeon saves a life. Is it the knife that is to blame, or the one who wields it? So therefore, it's not that we should judge too harshly the way that things are moving in this world with technology, money, and many other things. But how do we use it? Do we use it for our own benefit, or do we become so obsessed by it that we forget the true purpose of human birth, which is to get in touch with our true self, our higher self, know thyself as soul? Now, if these things obstruct us through our obsession with them, then they become a hindrance and they become a problem. And then we should try to rise above these things, because they are born of the physical realm. By one who worships those things, they remain physical. They never attain anything higher than that. And if we want to escape the karmic trap that we've so expounded about just moments ago, if we want to get out of all this illusion, then we need to rise above the limitations of the physical. So attaching ourselves to physical phenomena is not the way to rise above it. Attaching ourselves to higher phenomena, spiritual phenomena, is a way to normally actually automatically detach from the physical. It's not that you have to first detach from the physical and then attach yourself. That's not possible. The only way we can detach from this world is if we attach ourselves to something higher and better. That is the only way. If you try to force it any other way, you'll never be successful. You'll spend your entire life pushing yourself, trying to detach yourself, and it's not going to happen. Only those who have attached themselves to something higher has ever escaped the trap of the physical attachments. So yes, these things can be a trap, only if we obsess about them. If we see them as tools to help us get by this particular form of life that we are living in now, in creation as a human form, then they have no botheration to us. I mean, after all, masters themselves had money, bank accounts, they had children, they had work, job and things like that. They interacted with society. The difference is they weren't obsessed by it. They weren't attached to it all, because they were attached to something much higher. They went along with it because that was the role given to them in the karmic role as a physical being, that they took on that body. So they go happily and play along with it. But they have no interest in it whatsoever. But the outward manifestation of doing these things looks like they're involving themselves with it, but they're not. They're uninvolved.
Thank you. You spoke once about a moneyless society. Will this happen in the future as people become more spiritually aware?
That's absolutely true. By the latter part of this century, most people will rebel against the monetary system, because monetary system creates divides among humanity. It creates the so-called haves and the have-nots. And because of this, the have-nots want to join the realm of the haves, which creates all kinds of problems, from struggling in the world to try and attain a better pay, better job, better status, more power. And also, those ones who cannot do it that way go to crime. They want to enjoy the privilege of wealth, to be the have, by stealing it or doing some criminal activity. All of this will be rebelled against as humans evolve spiritually this century, because we've entered a new era called Dwapara Yuga, which is the beginnings of the spiritual era from about 2012. So you're going to notice that humanity will start rebelling against things that don't seem right. For example, our whole history of humanity has been based upon war. We have always endured war, accepted war as a way of life, even cherish it. Now, if you look at the films, many of them are about warring. You know, one nation beat another, conquest, everything. We have this thing about obsession with war and with conflict. So it seems so ingrained in us that is it even possible for us to ever give up on this idea that we can live a peaceful society without warring against each other? Well, interestingly, for those people who doubt, they say that we are just savages inside. You know, the evolutionists say we are absolutely savages like the animals and we know no difference. When the Ukraine war broke out, one of the most interesting things that I heard about being discussed in the news was, how could this happen in the modern age? And they were really bewildered by this. They say, how is this possible that we still go back to these barbarian activities of the past? That shows us that human beings are evolving in their spiritual awareness and even human awareness as time goes on. Yet for thousands of years previously, we were happily warring with each other and accepted as a way of life. But now suddenly we do not. Which is interesting. It's an interesting point to observe for those who doubt the evolution of human beings on Earth. So as we are evolving to a higher and higher state of awareness, we are encompassing more spiritually aware states of being. And one of those things is going to involve us overthrowing the money system that creates the haves and the have-nots, the divide. Yeah, and people say, why should we live this way when the earth gives all its resources free to us? Why should there be any cost in anything that we have? The only cost is the labor, and the only reason the labor demand money is because they have to pay for the goods. If everything was free, then nobody would charge their labor. We would work freely for the community because we all want to enjoy the goods of the world. Why not all work for free, help the world out, and in return we get all the goodies free? It's a much better system. And all the other problems associated with money will be eliminated. But yes, I'm writing a book about this, which will sometime be published, to start the process of, that will be a historic document. But we are evolving that way. That's why it is now the time to write about such things. Previously it wasn't.
Thank you. Do you know what is going to happen with the economies of the Western world? It has been low for a period now.
Obviously somebody's very worried about their finances and the price of their house and so on. Over the course of this decade, there's going to be many problems that humanity has to face, particularly in the Western world, in downgrading its economy. And we will see the rise of the Chinese and the Indian economies, which will become, by the end of this decade, the new superpowers, at the expense of the Western world. Because the Western world will become more, let's say, spiritually aware. They're more in tune with nature. They're going to, funny enough, become transformed as the East used to be. The East used to be very spiritually aware. Therefore, they did not invest in technology and materialism so much, because they were invested in spirituality. And the West is going to now do this. The West is going to invest in spirituality, and therefore people are going to not want to live the hardcore material life anymore. And as a result, industry and everything will not prosper so well. And the East, meanwhile, in a flip of reversal of events, would become from the spiritual awareness, suddenly take up the material role and start being the manufacturer, the producers of everything, and materially hold the world to ransom, just as the West did for so many years. So there is a transformation going on, beginning with this decade. And for those people hoping to escape the downfall of the Western economies, the only way to do that would be to move to the East, India or China, and then you'll have material, those same miserable life as you had here when materialism was rife. Spiritual living is a much better prospect for all than the material life that you're struggling now.
Thank you. Got a few questions regarding Bible scriptures. Was Mary Magdalene enlightened, and why did she not get recognition?
Yes, this is a very topical conversation point in the West at the moment, because they found the gospel of Mary Magdalene, the lost gospel. And although the church knew that this gospel existed, in fact a copy of it exists in the Vatican, it was never allowed to be released to the general public. But in recent times, other copies of this lost, forgotten gospel of Mary Magdalene has been revealed. And it shows Mary, rather than the prostitute that the Bible claims it to be, and the fallen woman, to be actually a very great woman and one of the closest disciples to Jesus. And in fact, an enlightened disciple, which is why even the Bible does not deny that she was the first one to see the spiritual form of Jesus when he was so-called crucified. She was the one who then told the other disciples, and the other disciples protested. Why has he come to you first and not us? Because you remember, this is a male-dominated society, right? The idea that a woman should see the Lord first, but that's because she was a very high-ranking disciple. And that just went past their heads. And so yes, Mary Magdalene was enlightened, and in fact she did carry on the mission of Jesus when he left, which is another subject of how he left the Levant, the Middle Eastern region, and travelled to Kashmir. That's another story. But let's say after his crucifixion, then she took on the mantle, and in fact much more than that, she was actually married to him and they had a son who survived till his 10th birthday, and unfortunately then he died of illness. But nevertheless, Jesus lived a life of the true saints, which means they lived a normal life. He had a job, which they speak about carpentry, but they don't speak much about how he went about his job. He was actually married, and he had a child, which is the same as all the holy martyrs around the world did, to show us that as living a normal human life, that we can rise above the limitations of the human form, even if we are married and have children and so on. So he lived a very normal life. His high status was given much later on by the Holy Roman Emperor King Constantine, or Emperor Constantine I, who made Christianity the official religion of Rome, and therefore they call it now the Holy Roman Empire. And with this, a book had to be put together. So the first Bible was put together, and it was decided what will be included and what will not be included. So the Gospel of St. Thomas and Mary Magdalene and others, even of Judas, and Judas' Gospel exists, one who so-called betrayed Jesus. Actually, he had his own Gospel as well, which wasn't to be included. So the modern form of the Bible is a very, let's say, limited version of the full truth of the Gospels and teachings that were given at the time, in which now they float around as separate books. So that's why one of them that's come to light is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and now people are saying, and have authenticated this to the period, so we know it exists, we know it was written at the time, yet it tells a very different story of the relationship of the disciples with Jesus and of Mary with Jesus, and it goes against the idea that she was the prostitute who cried to Jesus and asked him for forgiveness and so on. That's not actually how it happened. There were others who did that, but it wasn't her. But they simply lumped her as a woman among them in order not to venerate her or glorify her. And that was part of the Catholic Church's mission. So yes, interesting times ahead when all this gets revealed.
Thank you. Did Moses really part the Red Sea? Was he truly enlightened, or was he a devout follower of a lesser god?
The answer is no, he didn't part the Red Sea, but the Reed Sea did part before him. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by that. You see, Moses was an actual figure. He really was a Jewish leader who lived in Egypt at a time with all the other Jewish slaves, Hebrews. They call themselves Hebrews of the time, and they were definitely under the tyranny control of the Pharaoh. Now, Moses, because of his unique position in society, I'm not going to go into long detail about his high status, he was able to stand up to the Egyptian authorities and say that his people should be given better treatment than slaves, because they're the big builders of all the colossal structures that Egypt claims to have were built by these slaves, these Jews. So he said they should demand better rights and better standards and less tyranny and all these other things. And they should be fed, and they should be all these normal things that would expect any worker to enjoy the privileges today. In those days, life was very different. So it got to the point where the military were against the idea of the Jews being empowered in such a way, because their fear was, well, what will happen next? If you give them all this wealth and give them this privilege and ability, they can rebel against us and they can refuse to do this work, and then who will we have? We need slaves. Yeah? So this is political, a very political thing going on at the time of Moses. So it got to the point where Moses prayed and prayed to the God of the Jews, Yahweh, for help. What am I going to do? He said, they're not listening to me. The Egyptian authorities are not listening. What am I going to do? So as he prayed, he had a vision that the angel Gabriel came to him and said to him that you should lead the people out, set them free. And he said, how am I going to go about all of this? He said, well, we will give you the means. It wasn't explained exactly to Moses at that time, so he didn't know. He just said, go back to the authorities and say, if you will not support my people with the fairness that they deserve, then we will leave and find the promised land. Because this angel also said that the land resides in Canaan, where they will find peace and they will settle there, and that is their promised land. So now he was fixated on this promised land idea and freedom. So that's how the whole Moses adventure occurred. Now it got to the point where when they're crossing the Sinai desert, there you have the Red Sea, which is very wide and there's no way you can walk across it. But what people do not know is north of the Red Sea there's another very much smaller sea called the Reed Sea. Now the Reed Sea was a lake, a bit of a lake, but it was an estuary lake. It had an estuary, so it was a bit like a trapped body of water that was connected to the Mediterranean, and water was flowing backwards and forward tidally. It was a tidal lake, which is one of very few. But it was called the Reed Sea because essentially it was mostly brackish water in which reeds would grow, and it was full of reeds. So it's called the Reed Sea. Now later on in translation, the reed was lost and it became the Red Sea, because the Red Sea is the most famous one. And this Reed Sea would mostly dry up sometimes. You know, after 1,000 years would dry up, become dead, then it would flood again, and so on. So it went through cycles. Now during the time of Moses, 1496 BC, when he led the people to this point, it was flooded. How are they going to cross this sea? Yeah, but you know the way things work in chronology and history. It's very interesting how the Lord works in mysterious ways. At the same time as all this was happening, the Santorini island volcano erupted. It blew massively into the sky, creating such a tsunami that if anyone knows how a tsunami works, the first thing is, as the sea wells up in the ocean, it is withdrawn from the shores. In fact, you get more shoreline. The recede recedes away. So whilst he was sitting there pondering how to cross this sea, this event took place. Prior to the tsunami then racing across the shore and flooding everything, the collection of water to raise the height of the tsunami withdrew from all the shores, not just the Reed Sea. And suddenly the Reed Sea parted. It was a shallow lake. It wasn't very thin. So, and they were able to walk across it. And by the time they crossed it, the tsunami then came over and flooded the entire thing. And that's the actual account of what happened. Historically, though, they made this into a magical thing. Of course, you know, if you're going to set up a religion, you have to have a bit of magic in it. So the magic is that rather than just sitting there wondering what to do, that Moses instructed the sea to part, and it parted upon his command, and then closed upon his command. That's a very nice romantic way of doing it, but pure fiction. That's not how it happened. It's just, and then he wandered for 40 years in the desert. So what authority did Moses have to change the events if for 40 years the Hebrews wandered in the wilderness, had children, and the next generation carried on? If he could have the power to part the Red Sea, as they claim, then surely they'd want to be wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the promised land. You see, there's a lot of conflicts going on, but people don't like to think. Believers like to think, no, I don't destroy the romance of it all. This is how I like to believe it happened. So Moses was just a leader. He had no spiritual power, but he was a devotee of Yahweh, the Lord of the Jews, which is the astral realm Lord. And this astral demanded from Moses that he command his people to follow him, and these are the 10 commandments, and all these things were created by Yahweh, which is a lesser god, a deity of the astral realm, to follow him, or else. So the consequence was or else. If you do not do these things, there'll be consequences. This is not a loving Lord, forgiving Lord. This is the Lord of justice. So it gives you a clue as what level of Lord the Moses was dealing with at the time. So that hopefully answers the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will there be any miracles in our lifetime for all to see?
I think the miracle of the West becoming spiritual is the greatest one we will see. And the changes in the population, in the way they think and the way they operate by the end of this century, as well as the fact that by the end of this century we will be part of a galactic federation. We would have mastered anti-gravity technology and time travel, well, travelling through warps of space rather than time itself, but warping space. We could travel great distances, and as a result we will be able to meet other technologically advanced beings that we work with alongside. So yeah, all these things to come this century. Quite an interesting time ahead for us.
Thank you. I've got some random questions now. Why is it so important to be positive? How can this help our circumstances? Is there any physical change that takes place when we are positive?
Well, there's a famous law that everybody talks about, is the law of attraction. Like attracts like. And if that's the case, how do we demonstrate this? Well, if we're a positive thinker, a very, very positive thinker, then theoretically we should be able to attract positive events, which means that we should generate an air of positivity around us, which lead us to make positive decisions that leads to positive outcomes. And that's actually how it works. However, the West has hijacked this and saying that if we do positive thinking, even if we don't engage ourselves in positive activities to bring about those things, they will still happen anyway, and that's not true. So there's a misunderstanding about positivity generating events or changing the course of events, and actually us just generating a positive vibe around us that makes us do the right things that generates a positive event. You see, they are different things.
Is it true that earnest spiritual practitioners have a more youthful look? And if so, how is this?
It does happen, and the more one spiritually practices, but these are usually for people who are detached from the world. So for example, people are totally remote from worldly phenomena. For them, yes, they will witness a slowing down of the aging process. So therefore they'll look as if they are more youthful. not necessarily so. Some masters of the past were not the best looking at all, but they were beautiful souls.
Sure.
But yes, generally speaking, if we master the elements that control our physical form by rising above it, then we will age much more slowly and therefore look younger for our age.
If we are kind to others instead of putting ourselves first, is this just a noble way to live, or does this have any spiritual benefit?
I would first say that it is a noble way to live. The spiritual benefit is limited because we are all subject to our karma. What we're able to do and not able to do is already written, is already scripted for us. So we have no free will as such to do anything. However, we have the ability to change our attitude towards it all. If we manifest a spiritual, loving, kind, compassionate attitude, then certainly those positive actions we do enforce our spiritual merit, and they earn something called grace. And this grace now has an impact upon our spiritual welfare, but only because we understand the concept of what we're doing rather than just doing it out of emotions. If our higher awareness is awakened and we do a positive act with full awareness of who is doing it, who is in charge, that it's the Lord within us that's doing everything, and that we're just puppets. And if we attach ourselves to our higher authority, then definitely that higher authority will bless us with some form of benefit, spiritual benefit.
Thank you. Do dolphins have a higher spiritual vibration than most humans? And how is it that they can heal humans of illnesses?
It would seem that way, looking at the way dolphins interact with each other and their cooperation compared to humans in society. We could perhaps learn a lot from the cooperative and caring nature of dolphins. However, in the sense of spirituality, they are of the animal kingdom, and therefore they are not as aware or as conscious as human beings. Despite the fact that they show some measure of instinctual intelligence, it is built into them. It's not that they have a choice. They don't sit there and thinking, shall I do this or shall I do that? They act instinctively. But since that instinct is much more intelligent than, say, a lower animal, then we say these are intelligent beings which rival human beings. That's not really the case at all. And dolphins are great in their species. They're certainly more evolved than other mammals in the oceans. But that doesn't mean they equate to anything remotely reaching that of a human being. So intelligence must not be confused with spiritual awareness and a greater awareness or higher awareness of the self. And dolphins healing people, I think that this is a very Western idea, that if people swimming among dolphins, that because of the nature and the kind nature of dolphins, they feel good about it, and therefore they feel love. Just like they could say a dog heals you. You know, if you have a pet dog and the dog is very loving to you, a lot of people say that's very healing. So this is not only subscribed to dolphins, it's to all animals where you share this loving bond with them.
Thank you. As Germany has now announced that the West is at war with Russia, what does this mean for the UK? Will there be a World War III?
Well, I've already mentioned about the economic downturn that's going to affect the whole of the Western world because of all this nonsense. But there won't be a World War III, don't worry. No nuclear weapons will be fired at all. So they don't need to worry about that. The worst thing will be the economic crisis that will follow.
Sure. Since it is said that 7 to 9 generations are being liberated through our personal liberation, can we also be liberated because we are that 7 to 9 generation that preceded us?
Yes. How do you know? How do you know whether you're not one of the 7 or 9 generations from a previous relative who was who encountered a perfect living master? You do not know. These it's actually more complicated than that, but I don't wish to go into that now. We haven't got all day to talk about this. It's best to experience it to understand. Because it's not only our relatives, our friends even can be liberated. We may be a friend of somebody who was spiritually aware, and as a result of that, generations later, we were born with an ability to encounter that spirituality for ourselves. So it's not just 7 to 9 generations of family or connections, it's also friends, close friends. But yeah, don't worry about that too much. These are just examples that masters give to show how the karmic system works. It's not meant to be something that we dwell upon.
Mm.
Yeah.
They then go on to say then, is list A or B still relevant? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously an Ishwarji follower, because Ishwarji introduced the concept of list A and list B. And list A are the, for those who don't know, are the ones who are going to go back home in this lifetime with that particular master. And list B are those who are marked for a future master, although they're initiated now, but they won't go back in this lifetime. They'll have to come back again to meet another master who will be the one who takes them home. So there is something called initiation by proxy, or masters accepting disciples on behalf of a future master that's to come, to clean them up a little. So this is the idea behind it, that so Ishwarji labeled this as list A and list B, you know, and he'll just famously talk about that. But it's a very real thing. There actually is you could say a list A and a list B, but what that actually means is that the list A people will go back with that particular master, and what the signs will be is that they fall head over heels in love with that master. They have absolute attunement to that master, to the point that they are the true faithful, and they have true trust in the master. They live that spiritual way of life that the master dictates. They have constant remembrance of the master. They involve him or her in everything they do. So that individual, which is the minority, are on list A. The vast majority are on list B, which are those ones who follow the sentiment of a spiritual master, like the idea, they like the goal, they like everything, but they're not 100% committed yet. They still have a foot in both camps. There's a very famous saying in Arabia, which is, they say, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel as well. And what this means is, this is classic list B people. They say, look, you know, I want to trust in the Lord and the master and everything, but I'm still going to do my thing to make sure and preserve myself and to earn this or to achieve that, you know. So yeah, it's this is the list B people, because the list A people are overwhelmingly absorbed in love with the master, and the list B people are so, you know. If master does me a favour, suddenly he's great.
Yeah.
If things go wrong, I don't know about this master, and that's list B.
Okay, thanks. Are all of our thoughts pre-scripted? If so, then surely we cannot help the way we behave, or is it possible to change our behaviour?
It's true, everything is pre-scripted, absolutely everything. From the higher sense point of view, we have no free will whatsoever. And there's great beauty in that, because if you reach the point of no free will, you're free, you're liberated, you have no decisions to make, nothing to aim for, you are totally free. And this level of freedom is not understood by the minds of human beings. They see the fact that if you have no free will, that's it, somebody else is pulling the strings, and they don't have your best interest. And that's not actually how it works. In fact, living the life without free will, it really is the greatest option, and it's what the soul experiences directly in Satgurus, in this highest kingdom of God. So it's not the taboo thing or the bad or the bogey man that people think it is. So people don't like to say it. And even masters are so aware of this problem that people have with free will that they say, oh, we have conditioned free will. You know, we can make choices and so on. Yeah, that's true, you can make choices, but that's not free. The choices are not free. The choices are based upon the options. Now, if the options are limited, so for example, I've often said that if you go to a family home and you're really thirsty for mango juice, but the only thing they can offer you is tea or coffee, and now you have to make a choice. Your free will is, I want mango juice. They don't have mango. So my free will is written off straight away. But what do I have left? I have choice now. They're giving me a choice to make, and I have to make the choice. And what's the choice based upon? Your preference. Some people like coffee, some people like tea. Yeah? Where did that preference come from? It's not calculated. Nobody's sitting there working out the precise chemical constituents of these substances, therefore if I ingest them, how is it going to benefit me or not benefit me? No, they go by preference. And that preference comes from what we call sanskars. These are the impressions we've brought to this life from our previous life experiences. They create the likes and dislikes that we all inherently have. Nobody's taught to like or dislike. It is inherent in us, which is an interesting thing, even for the baby. So this is not free because it's inherent. It's given to us. We have no option but to like tea or coffee. So then we exercise this idea that we have some free will, we can make choices, but we confuse choices with free will. So actually there is nothing that's free, and we can, however, in some of the time we have to make choices, if we encounter higher and noble thinking individual, we associate with the noble ones, we can start thinking differently. Again, that is scripted. Who we're going to meet in this life. If we come across the saintly ones, the enlightened ones, then they can redirect our thinking to higher thoughts so that now we can behave differently. But only because that was actually scripted.
Thank you. 2 questions. What is spiritual ego?
Yes, this is something I get asked about a lot, particularly by seekers who are not initiated yet by a perfect living master. They go to the Dera or to various other ashrams and holy places, and they note that the spiritual sevadars there, the people who's offering the service, seem to have a certain attitude problem, as they say. And this attitude problem is not based upon humility and kindness, but more on what we'd find as pride and ego and power and status. And the complaint I often hear is, why should this be the case? We go to this spiritual place expecting to be welcomed with love, compassion and kindness, yet in fact we're met with the exact opposite, sometimes even worse than the non-believers in their ego and the way that they treat us and look upon us and judge us. And this is because people do not understand that just because somebody is initiated onto the path or made into a disciple, they have begun the transformation process, they've not completed it. Yeah? It's like if we see a building being constructed, we say, well, all the builders are there, I want to turn up, why is it not built? They said they've started the building process. No, but all the builders are there, all the materials are there, it should be built instantly. No, it's not instant. It takes time. Come back in a year's time, you'll see the building there. So when we think of somebody on the path that they should be holier than thou, and they're not, then we question them. We may even question the path, saying, is this for real? Because look at these people. But what we don't understand is those people are going through a transformation process themselves. They're gradually improving, and depending on where they started out with, they have a certain distance to cross. If they were quite egotistical as human beings, then they're going to bring that ego with them into the spiritual path, and they're going to have to slowly have that whittled down through witnessing the humility of others, and also by ego bashing with others who are also egoist, fighting it out, who's the supreme Sevadar, who's the supreme one here. And it's a good ground. Even Babaji would laugh about this. He said, if I did not collect all these people here when answering a question at Haynes Park in the centre in the UK, he said, they will go out into the world and do more mischief. At least here we can contain them. He said, we keep them here. He said, and then somebody complained, but they are so close to you, Babaji. They see you every day, How come they can be like this? He said, even members of the Master's family often don't believe the Master because he's so ordinary on the outside, so human looking. Only those who have that inner awareness generated within them will recognize the Master, whether it's in their own family or a million miles away. He said just because they're close doesn't mean that they are highly aware. It just means they need more attention. I need to keep them close to me, to keep an eye on them, and to give them more attention. Otherwise they'd leave the path. Others are content to be distant and still follow the path.
Interesting. Okay, last question now. What is divine intervention, and have you personally experienced this?
Well, I always try to not talk about myself personally, but yes, divine intervention does exist, as I explained earlier, through something called grace. And grace is such that no matter who you are in life, what you're doing, maybe even a villain, when you become earnestly involved in seeking the highest truth, so much so that it occupies most of your thoughts of the day, it becomes an obsession, then you earn the right to divine intervention. No matter what you may be doing in life physically, whatever karma has been given to you, whatever your role is in life, even that of a villain, which is why sometimes famous villains became saints. History, particularly around the time of Baba Sawan Singh Ji, great master of Bias, who notoriously had a collection of villains around him who he initiated and were the most devout disciples around him, and he gave them particular seva to do as a result. Yet those people previously were villains. The Lord does not judge the character you've been given to play in this life, only which direction you're heading. Are you heading towards spirituality and seeking? And if so, are you earnestly doing so? If that is the case, I don't care whether you're black, brown, green, yellow, whether you're man or woman, whether you're young or old, or what profession you have, whether it's a criminal or a builder or a villain or a lawyer or whatever. He says, I will save you regardless, because these imposter characters are not your real identity anyway. I'm not here to save the character. I'm here to save the soul behind the character. And this is the misunderstanding that people have when they judge others. Because, how can it be possible that such villains, even there was a famous case which Ishwarji used to tell about this initiate or disciple of Great Master, who suddenly burst into the room and they were having a meeting and said, Master, please forgive me. I have committed all the crimes you said not to do. I have eaten meat, I have drank wine, and I was with woman yesterday. He said, please forgive me, please forgive me. He said, I made all these mistakes. And Great Master looked at him and said, okay, you are forgiven. He said, thank you, Master, and he walked out. Now the people sitting there, the committee members, and they were discussing some business of the day of the Dera in India, were shocked and said, but Master, you did not reprimand him, you did not tell him off, you just simply forgave him. Sorry. He said, yes, I did. He said, in such a case, if he was to come and do it again, would you forgive him again? He said, yes, I would. He said, and again? He said, yes, I would. He said, but would you not reprimand him at all? He said, in this world, there are so many judges out there. He said, so many people are to judge others and curse others for what they do, without understanding that the true Lord is the real doer behind everything. He said, don't put me among the judges. I'm only a forgiver. I only know how to forgive, not how to judge. And I advise you to do the same. So it goes to show how masters see us. They don't judge us. They're forgivers. And they respond to those who appeal to them. And that appealing, see, think about it, that man who was the villain, he would go to the Great Master to ask for forgiveness. That was only possible if he realized who that Great Master was. That he was the Lord incarnate. That he had the power to forgive. Just like when those asked Jesus for forgiveness, they went to him because they saw in him the power to forgive others. So these marks of a great saint are, if recognized by their disciples, the masters cannot but forgive them. That's why he even forgave Judas. He said to Judas, Jesus said, when Judas was about to betray him, sitting there at the Last Supper, he said, go and do what you must be done. And Judas, with Jesus' blessing, went out and betrayed him for the so-called 30 pieces of silver, and which resulted in his crucifixion. So this was with the agreement of Jesus that this was to be his exit. You see, now we curse Judas, so much so that nobody would have the name Judas. You know, to be called Judas is like really bad in Western world. Even the name, like nobody would be called Hitler now. Nobody would name their son Hitler at all. Yeah, there are certain names that you not give. Judas is one of them. The poor man. But actually he was so devoted of the Lord, he just did the Lord's bidding. And people did not understand what actually took place there at that time. They had their very human interpretation. So yeah, it's things are not so straightforward as it seems. Masters of forgiveness, not judges.
Thank you.
Anyone got any questions? Just
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, as like food technology is advancing, and I just want to know what the karmic and spiritual position is on like lab-based meat and that, where you're not harming the animal.
The trouble is, you see, that if you derive a cell, let's say a living matter, from a lower vibrational level, whether you make it in a laboratory or whether you make it on the farm, the vibration level is still the same. It doesn't change the constituent. It changes the means of production, but not the chemistry.
But wouldn't the vibration and energy levels be different from?
No, it is of an animal vibrational energy. So the vibrational energy of the animal is the same, whether it's manufactured in a laboratory or whether it's manufactured outside. But sure, the element that's being removed is the killing part. So let's say it has less karmic implication, but it still has a lower vibrational level, which is unsuitable for a spiritual practitioner. When we spoke about eating even certain vegetables that affect us, mindsets, then animal products lower us even further. They have a very heavy element, which doesn't allow the practitioner to rise up and cross the eye center. Which is why even historically, yogis in the past in India, famous meditators, never ate meat. They didn't have a perfect living master to direct them, but they figured it out. That if you eat lower vibrational foods or heavy vibrational foods, they stop you from rising, even for the yogis.
But plant-based food is not low vibration.
No, it doesn't interfere so much. It still interferes. If you eat too much plant-based food, then you're weighed down. The same. So they say, don't be a glutton. Don't eat too much. 1 meal a day is enough. Yeah, so that's more important. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. We're all done.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll have our lunch break now.
So dehi paje har ki sev pajo gobind pul mat ja मानस जानम का यही